there, welcome to Lawfully Chaotic. Thank you for watching. I'm not going to say joining because there's nobody in the chat yet. So, Jason of TTRPG Academy, my partner in crime, is indisposed tonight. So I have Collin here with me, who has graciously agreed to join the conversation. So I'm not just sitting here talking to myself for an hour and boring the shit out of everybody. So Collin, thank you for joining me. Collin is one of my players in two of my games, actually, Rise of Tiamat and one of my homebrew campaigns. So welcome.
Thanks for having me, bud. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. I think we're going to do a little bit of an abbreviated show tonight, maybe 30, 40 minutes. We'll see how it feels. Otherwise, I don't think I have any announcements for this week. So let's just jump in. So Collin, give a little bit of what is your background with role-playing in general and with D&D? I know that you are relatively new to it. Did you used to play way back in the day, or when you started playing with me, was that a completely new exposure to the game?
So did not play back in the day, like as a kid growing up or anything like that. The only close exposure to Wizards of the Coast would have been Magic the Gathering, really.
Okay.
But
I didn't know you. I actually didn't know you played Magic.
And it was kind of more of there was a big rush of it, say would have been like late 90s for me.
Yeah,
like between like sixth to eighth grade type of thing. Mm-hmm. Playing the library, and then you know everybody had the Trapper Keepers, the giant binders of the cards saved together, coming into play and stuff.
Love the Trapper Keepers.
Oh man,
I'm surprised nobody has re-released Trapper Keepers.
I think the majority of 30-plus-year-olds would buy them up. They would right. They would just eat their lunch. Let me tell you.
Right.
But it's just one of those things, like more in the mythical thing. Like never growing up was understanding really of RPGs, even though I may have started playing them. And so really, I think the best way to call it an RPG, not specific to Dungeons and Dragons, but when I kind of stumbled across. With a friend of mine, he at the time had started playing it. He was super hyped about it. Was when Oblivion came out, and then Elder Scrolls, right?
Yep.
So when Elder Scrolls came out and stuff like that was kind of my experience to the understanding of a little bit of that. That was kind of the RPG experience, but still as a single person thing. I kind of wasn't as understanding of what was going on with it.
Mm-hmm.
But then it became more interesting later on as I got more and more into video games, and then you kind of fall down the hole of other stuff. So like Fallout, one of my favorite all-time games. Fallout, started with Fallout 3, and then 4, and then 1776. Then got back into Elder Scrolls, and then got into The Witcher, and then it was just kind of a weird happenstance. I just randomly started getting these reels on my Instagram. You start going through reels and you're looking at the videos. Yep. And they had a bunch of Dimension 20 reels, or quick snippets, and they're like, I kind of didn't realize it at the time, but then I was like watching them, and they were just like playing D&D, but it was just like the comedic parts of what they were doing and how things were working out for them. And I had absolutely zero understanding of them, but they kept coming up, and it was kind of funny. And so then I kind of looked them up, and they just happened to be in a time where I had like eaten everything up I could do on, Netflix, Hulu, and they kind of ended up kind of filling that entertainment gap for a while. And so I basically watched their, Fantasy High season, and that kind of was like, oh, this is what D&D is. This is like, I didn't understand there's a whole role play, like you literally choose your own adventure style that goes into it. I mean, I kind of gauged, but I thought it was just like a layout game, and then it's a roll of the dice to see which direction you're going, which, I mean, yes, it kind of is, but there's still so much more nuance to it, which I don't think you can really understand when you first get an explanation of the game, right? Until you start to see somebody do it, or see how much fun you can have with it, right?
Okay.
And that's
So
the
you
thing that I
really
think
had
is hilarious.
no, other than, I mean, everybody has heard of Dungeons and Dragons, but you really had no
Yeah.
in intuition on what the game was about.
Zero clue. And it wasn't again
Okay.
until I think I fell into those things, started watching and seeing what they're doing, and then tried to understand what was happening and why things were happening the way they were. And then it fell into. So then, like, I basically ate up as much of the Dimension 20 stuff as I could that was available on YouTube, because I was, being kind of cheap. I didn't subscribe to their TV, which maybe I should feel bad about, but whatever. and then I'll get to it one day.
Hey, I can share my Netflix password with you if you want.
Yeah, exactly.
For another 6 days till.
Yes, exactly. And then, and then it was of course that natural progression. As soon as you watch all those things, of course, the algorithm's going to start saying, "Oh, well, if you like this," and then you fall in the Critical Role. And then I literally ate up. I started at episode 1 of
Mighty Nine.
Their second, Mighty Nine of their second campaign, not really even knowing much about Critical Role. And then going through like all 120 episodes,
That's
like
really funny
quick.
because, believe it or not, I also came in a little bit late to Critical Role. I also started right as they started Mighty Nine. So I started with that at number 1. And and that is what, that's really, I went back and I watched some of Vox Machina. I'm watching, Bell's Hells, obviously, but I equate, when I think of Critical Role, I immediately think of Mighty Nine. So it's funny that it was the same timing.
Right. And it was a weird, I'll admit it was a kind of a weird transition too, because you go from what I can only describe as more of the comedic setup for Dropout and the Dimension 20 guys, because again, they're all comedic writers, really, to an extent, comedic actors. Like, that's how they're going to play it, which is how I love that. I think it's hilarious. Not to say that the Critical Role guys can't do the same thing, but it is a little bit more like, oh, hey, yeah, by the way, there's a serious component to, there are consequences that Matthew Mercer will drop on you.
Yeah,
which is interesting. Like, oh man, that's a good point.
I liken this resurgence of the game. I mean, when we were kids, well, you weren't playing D&D, you were doing other stuff, Magic and whatnot. Which, by the way, when we finally get to so Collin's in Chicago, one of my few players who's actually in Chicago with me. So when we finally do get together for a drink, we'll have to break out some Magic cards. I haven't played in like 15 years.
Oh, buddy, yeah,
like 10,000 freaking Magic cards.
I think I started playing the Magic online, which through Steam.
Oh God,
which is super convenient. Super convenient.
For many reasons, I decided can't go there. I got sucked into World of Warcraft for a while, and I was like, I'm not doing Magic online. But anyway, this. I mean, I think it's safe to say everybody can agree that Critical Role and Matt Mercer, are the driving force behind the resurgence. Not just the resurgence of the game, but the game emerging into the the more common vernacular, so that people who have never played it, their interest is piqued, and it's brought so many new people into the game, which I think is really amazing. Because like I was saying before, when I was a kid, I played with my 4 or 5 buddies from school, and we played in the basement every weekend at my buddy's house. I would go over there to sleep over, and we never looked for new players because, I mean, it was dorky, and the nerds are in the basement playing D&D.
Right, so but when you got the party too, it's got to be hard to do too, right?
Well, yeah,
I would imagine.
But it still blows my mind that, here's somebody who, you have a similar background. Obviously, people are drawn to the game because they have a similar background, Magic, or, video games, the entertainment, the media aspect of it. But it still really blows my mind when somebody like you comes to the game having never played it before and realizes that it can be much deeper than what most people think it is. And I think that is also what Critical Role did, even for longtime players, is I mean, everybody kind of came to the realization, in my opinion, and I know I'm not saying that, they did it and everybody was like, oh yeah, you can play really seriously. I mean, obviously there have been people that's been doing that for years, but I think it really put it in the forefront of people's minds that this can be a very, very deep and cathartic and therapeutic experience for a lot of people. And for a lot of people, this is their escape. And this is how they deal with a lot of issues. What I've noticed about you is you dove in like head first and really got up to speed incredibly fast. So kudos on that. But I mean, I feel like when you play, and I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass, I really feel like you have been doing this your whole life. And it's a pleasure having you at the table. I mean, you role play exceptionally well. You avoid metagaming very well. So it's interesting seeing somebody in your position who has never experienced the game jump in and absorb it so quickly. How does it feel from your end, diving into this and now being where you are in a few short, well, I guess it's more than a few months. I mean, how long have you been?
We started back in 21, obviously, but I feel like it wasn't,
because you
like,
jumped
it was like
in halfway.
October, November.
Right. So it's been a good 6, 7, 8 months for you.
Right. But I mean, in consideration of that too, like the entire summer leading up to that, before I kind of worked my way up to like, you know what, I'm gonna get into this. Again, I had an entire summer, but I basically consumed them all pretty quick, probably in little to no time. But if you think about it, like the 40 plus hours, if I'm remembering correctly, the number of episodes for Fantasy High. Then they've got Unsleeping City for that, so another probably 40-ish hours, right? Just watching those guys go through their stuff in game and understand like the rule breakdown. And then, right, all 122 or 120 episodes of season 2 of Critical Role.
Yep.
Which works out to, like, I think I did the math in my head. It was if you're averaging 4 hours an episode, that's like 480 hours.
Oh yeah,
it's gaming, right?
Huge amount of content.
So, and then you got all the other ancillary stuff. Like I'll go and watch and listen to like how they're thinking about stuff or doing stuff. Like they have I believe it was Brennan Lee Mulligan had Matt Mercer on. So I was like, okay, these two guys are talking. What are they talking about? And I went and like watched their little video about what they're doing or talking about and how things work and how they build things, the ideas. And so that's, I think that those things are the things that play into, again, a whole understanding. And don't get me wrong, like, it's not going to be for everybody, because just talking to some people about it, like they're like, that sounds ridiculous. What do you mean you're just sitting and talking or like conceptualizing? I'm like, well, it's just like, the same thing about reading a book, right? Like everybody that read Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit has their idea of what it should look like. And of course now, after the movies came out, they're like, okay, yeah, that kind of came pretty close to what I had in my head. And now that's the only thing. But to get to the thing you're asking, the point, I think it's just the fact that you see what it can be, right? And that everything is permitted. You're right. And that everything's permitted that I can convince you to let me do. And that's an aspect of it that I really like, because one, for me, one of a lot of things I think about when I'm playing is just, is this gonna benefit us or hurt us, right? The cost to benefit, ratio, whatever.
As a party, you mean? Or
Sorry,
as players, or as the party?
Yeah, as
or
both. Well, technically both, but yeah, but
okay.
Mostly like, I don't want to hurt the party, obviously, but I also don't want to hurt the character, get my character killed or whatever. But like, kind of be successful in things. Again, like it's in essence a game, but it's not a game, because there's a literal opposed thinker on the other side of everything I'm doing, and then there's the rest of the group interacting, and then the rest of the world around you that's interacting. So it's a harder, but that's the aspect of it too. That I think, again, thinking of it that way, seeing what other people have done as like a baseline. So that means I can do all those things and more, but anything I can come up with, right? Like, but then, so is it going to hurt the party? Is it going to hurt my character? Is it going to be funny? And can I get away with it? Can I convince you?
Yeah.
Oh, hey, you know what? Hey, if I did this and then I kind of do that, and can I get this role? And you're like, that's a stretch. Or like, you know what? This could be fun. Again, the funny aspect playing back into that could be funny. Let's try it. So it works, right? Because you can negotiate your way through real life in a lot of ways to a certain extent like that, obviously. Since there are also laws that prevent you from doing some of the stuff that you would do in this fantasy game. Because again, it's a game you're going to run away.
You can't be a murder hobo in real life.
Can't be a murder hobo. You actually have to run places, and running gets you tired. It doesn't get your character tired, right? And again, if you get the right number of rolls, you're gonna get away from the cops, or whatever.
In real life, funny. if I could apply like one rule of D&D, I might actually just get rid of encumbrance. Just be able to carry shit all the time. Encumbrance,
or I mean, I thought about this, and I've followed this guy that I've sent you on Instagram, obviously, the Monkey DM.
Yeah.
Shameless shout out to that guy. He's got some great stuff.
We're all about shout outs here, shameless plugs here. So feel free.
I don't even know the guy, but hey, send me some free stuff. But but he's got a good point. He talks about like, hey, the only thing that's really unrealistic, I say unrealistic, but like the only aspect that's ridiculous about DMM, or however he worded it, was the fact that you get a full 8-hour rest, right? And you're boom, I'm back, right? And you do that, and I'm like, well, I thought about like, okay, so you do a short rest, you only get this, but what's a way you could do like, I kind of got a long rest, but I kind of didn't. I slept really bad, so then would I get only X amount of stuff back? But of course, that's not feasible. I mean, you just give everybody that's too much to try and work out. But it's still funny. It's another funny thing you could do.
I know. Well, and the only that I've done a bunch of homebrew rules,
right?
And I try, to your point that you made earlier, as a DM, I try not to, I try to have. So I've got a little bit of an improv background, and I try to apply that, especially the yes and. If it's at all possible, I try not to say no. If somebody says. I mean, there are very few things that I won't allow in a game. Somebody says, I want to play a centaur. I'm like, let's not go there because, you're a horse and you're not going to be able to go into 3/4 of the places that I'm going to have you go. Yeah. So
you're not going to be able to climb any rocky plane. Rough terrain is impossible.
So let's just for the sake of...
As soon as you break a leg, we got to put you down. So many aspects
Somebody
to
get
that.
The crossbow.
Hey, sorry.
But
look away, little buddy.
Yeah, but in terms of character choices on how to play and background and story, you and I have talked about stuff like that. A lot of times I'm like, yeah, let's try it as long as as long as we can justify it somehow in the story and build a narrative around it. Let's do it, because like you said, it's a game and it's still about entertainment. And that's one of the things that I love having you at my tables, because you're always thinking about that stuff. In fact, you started DMing already, haven't you?
Yeah, I did. Obviously,
that's pretty
using
impressive.
You as a sounding board for a lot of stuff. I was like, man, I can do this.
That's still pretty impressive, though. Yeah.
It was. And then, granted, it's definitely not as easy as I thought it was gonna. Well, yeah, it was not as easy as I thought it'd be, because what will happen is, and I do a lot of planning in just my life in general for work.
Yep.
Then you start to do that in the game, and you're starting to plan for all these eventualities that you can't know. And then that'll drive you crazy. And I'm like, okay, I'm just overthinking this.
You just touched upon one of the key stumbling block is the wrong word. You touched upon one of the key problems to overcome as a DM, and that is in fact, Jason and I just talked about this last week, which is over planning. It's like, I've got this great scenario, and I've actually bought 3D terrain, and it's going to go like this, and then you guys as a party say, we're going to go over here, and it's like, fuck.
Right. And I think there's an aspect to that that's like, do I want to build those things out and have them ready, because you'll eventually use them. You can change a few things and make those things still work, right?
Yes.
But it's just in the instance when it's not exactly what you're looking for. And so I'm pretty lucky that I'm running it for my brother and sister-in-law. Okay. They're experienced DM player, D&D players. but then I'll because I told him like, hey, listen, I'm just doing this and kind of going off the cuff, and I was using the Wildspire's homebrew writings that they had produced for their minis they did, and I was like, hey, listen, we're gonna go off of this, and then I'm probably gonna question you guys. So basically, after every session so far, which we only had 2, I'm like, okay, hey, talk to me about this. You know, try not to give anything away in my story, but then, or my what I've technically planned out for the story or the item. But like, hey, did it feel like I was directing you or giving you too little or too much, or why did you go do these things? What were you guys thinking and seeing versus what I wasn't seeing? Because that's another aspect to it that you can't really figure out. And then it comes, it's just like, hey, why do they do this? Or I'm like, I'm making it glaringly obvious they should go this direction. It'd be for the best. But then whatever. And then of course it was funnier because the second start of the second time we did it, I basically just, well, you guys went and did this and decided not to take a long rest, so I don't really know what you're expecting. You guys were basically on the verge of having a point of exhaustion. And then of course, like, my brother's like, well, since this weird voice in my head said something about not taking a long rest, like, yeah, that's your conscience speaking. Saying, hey, maybe we should go take a break, get caught up on stuff, But and then trying not to be too pushy, but also like, okay, like, let it kind of play out, and like, and then if they think of something I didn't think of, yeah,
it's definitely a skill, the subtle cues without basically saying, all right, you guys are going this way and you're doing this,
just that.
Oh, so I know what I was saying before about the home. You know that I homebrew. So the only thing I've delved into with homebrew, in terms of fucking with the long rest, is wearing armor. And I've got to tweet, and I've got to tweak that a little bit because I know that we've all played it in our campaign. But I've often thought that there is it's interesting you bring that up, because I don't think to date that I've discussed this really, but there's an interesting aspect to playing as a character in D&D, which is like, it's very video game-esque, where it's like, oh, okay, I gotta get through this level and then fight the boss, and then I'm healed up and I can go on to the next level.
Yeah, I want to get through the story. I want to see the rest of it.
I'm not correlating D&D character levels to video game levels, but I'm just talking about the overall, like, I got to get to the save point, if you will,
absolutely. That's absolutely the case.
I do think it would be really interesting to further, if you take a look at my homebrew, a lot of it is kind of convoluted and a little bit complicated, but I think the reason that I do that is because I like to offer DMs and players the ability to tune the game and to make it a little more granular. And not necessarily to complicate it, but just to kind of, as a storytelling tool, if you will. You brought up Lord of the Rings, and it's funny because over all the years, that I've been in geekdom, I've probably read Fellowship of the Ring about 20 times. I've probably read Two Towers about 7, and I've probably read Return of the King maybe twice. Yeah. And what I like about Fellowship of the Ring, and why I keep rereading that, is because it starts very small. It's four hobbits leaving the Shire, and even just that initial journey to Rivendell is so fraught with angst and terror at times, and I love that, and I kind of like the same thing. You came in when I was running Court of the Dragon Queen. You came in, I think, after the 40-day trip that the characters did from Greenest to Waterdeep. It was literally like 40 days of game time. Now, most DMs would maybe run a couple of encounters and chalk that up to travel time. I wanted it to feel like a slogging, exhausting, muddy, cold, wet journey.
You were arduous. Yeah,
arduous. Yeah. we played almost every day of those 40 days. And by the time they were done, like, it really feel like, Jesus Christ, that was fucking excruciating.
Fucking Christ.
Right. So that's kind of the way I approach homebrew, is to just give the option to, let's make this aspect really realistic. So getting back in this long-winded explanation, getting back to the long rest thing, I've often thought that it would be very cool. Yes, exactly. It felt like high school, a long, arduous journey filled with angst and terror.
Pretty fair,
But I've often thought that it would be really cool to, to get more granular with the long rest. And it's like, okay, you're truly getting 8 hours. You're at an inn. You've been traveling. Right. You get a good night's rest. You're rested. But if you're camping or whatever, or there's, an encounter in the middle of the night, that it somehow affects your rest, so that over time it does build up. And there is this anxiety, like, fuck, how much longer can I keep going before
we gotta find
before I die?
We gotta get off the road. We gotta find a cave, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's fun. What's funnier, I think, about that too, is now, even on the flip side of that, it doesn't matter what if you're adding this hurdle, right, or this possibility, then I can still come to a point I'm still allowed in my imagination, as long as I can think of it. I come up with, you're like, oh wait, well, yeah, we might be on the road, but we brought supplies for glamping. We're basically going fuck, like, I can, but if we can work it out and the rolls work out just fine, guess what? Like, it's not going to work out every time, but it still gives you the option. It's not to say that it's going to be so bad every time, but you just know, when in this span from end to end, it's that, okay, if something fucked up on the rolls, we're going to be in a bad way. We're going to be, I don't even, now that I think about it, I obviously don't have it memorized, but the third or fourth level of exhaustion, what starts to happen. But there's a lot of bad shit that starts to happen.
The first one is not generally a big deal, other than by the time you get even level 2 exhaustion, it starts fucking with you. And I don't know. I love that realistic aspect. And again, it shouldn't. Yeah. It's all about the story and having fun and the narrative. If it fits the narrative, great. If it doesn't, don't do it. But there may be times where it kind of needs to feel. So Paradox says he's in a game with a mechanic like that, where the food was bad, sustaining no true rest from the aura of depression in the air in the projects. Yeah. So like, it just builds up over time. Yeah. And I've often thought, again, along those lines of starting small, like a group of first level characters. So even a short rest was hard. Recovering spell slots was a struggle. Yeah, exactly. Like, you gotta really be resting, basically.
Right.
But in the interest of starting small, like first level characters, if you meet 3 orcs, that should be terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah. And especially, again, take like 2 towers where they're chasing you down. You fight 2 orcs and you kill them, great. And then there's 3 more that show up. And then, and it slowly wears you down. I think that could make for some very...
Or even, if you even take it back to the Fellowship, like you talked about, right? I mean, 4 hobbits being chased by the writer, right? Mm-hmm. I'm obviously blanking on the names. I don't have all memories, but that in itself, the anxiety into like, we were being hunted.
Yes, exactly.
Something's on our trail, and then now there was 2. Now there was 3. Then all 9 of them or 7 of them.
Yeah.
9 of them caught them just at the river, right? Just barely. So even then they were on all 4 of them, to the extent even after they found Aragorn on death's door.
Exactly. And I think that's kind of the reason that I approach my homebrew rules the way I do, is because I think sometimes, the game can get very big, and once you reach 11th, 12th, 13th level, it's like, okay, I gotta fucking throw a god at you guys to have any chance of making you nervous.
How else you handicap your players, really?
Yeah. Without making it, without being so obtuse about it. Right. But I think it's kind of cool to run a game or it would be cool. I've never done it, come to think of it, but I think it would be cool to run a game where everything is very much on a smaller scale.
Yeah.
And much more personal.
Like you, if you were to rerun like Horde of the Dragon Queen, but you're like, hey guys, it's exactly a week's journey, and guess how many games we're gonna have to play before you get out of this? Seven games. You're gonna play 7 times.
Yeah.
And you don't know what's happening.
Yeah. And I asked them again. I think you joined right after that journey in Waterdeep. But I asked them, I'm like, if you guys are feeling like it should feel from a story aspect like it's slogging. Yeah. But if as players you are getting bored, let me know. And they were like, no, this is awesome.
I think there's just, it is each person an individual look on it. And we obviously know people that are like, hey man, I'm just here to fight. I'm just here for the action aspect of it. The rest of the stuff I could do whatever out. But then
that's when we get bored and just seek out fighting pits.
right you go get the fight, or you have the cutaway dreamscape of you fighting the devils or whatever. But I mean, like I think it's just a matter of how much, because even that what you're describing can still be hilarious, right? Like I think there's the good and the bad that comes with it, just like the real life aspects you're trying to say. Like after 4 or 5 nights of bad sleep, I'm gonna be in a fucking bad way.
Yeah,
I'm really not up for any of this shit. I'm gonna be definitely not on my A game, right? So then things are at disadvantage. Things are at decreased by 1 or something, and that's a thing. But then it also comes back to each individual's perception of the game. Like I don't know if that sounds fun being at a -1, because I really like rolling 20s, or I really like rolling this, and yada yada. And so it is a mix of, I think, that's a good rule that you could implement, but then it also comes down to, we're playing a game to get away from real life, real life.
Yes.
And so it's so hard to say, hey, we should do this.
Yeah.
Right.
And you hit the nail on the head, because at the end of the day, it is a game. It is meant to be entertaining, and there should be angst to drive the storyline, but there should not. I don't think there should be actual personal angst where it affects you day to day in your real life, because there's enough of that shit going on.
Let me ask you a question though, and this is maybe a thing.
Sure.
And this I think could still solve. And it's funny because we think about these things, we're talking about like, how do we do these things? You want to drive the story, we want to make sure these things happen, but we still want to have levels of. It's weird. You don't want to call it easy, medium, and hard mode, but you can like shave off how hard you want it to be or how easy you want it to be, depending on where you get to, right? And it's almost like a. You ever played? Have you played Witcher 3? Did you ever play?
I have not.
So, and I didn't know this when I first started it, but I started playing Witcher 3, and I'd been pretty experienced. I felt like, again, from playing Fallout on just normal and kind of hard modes, that I was like, okay, yeah, I can just play this at a little bit of a higher level or harder level, and it was going to be, all right. And I was at the beginning, start of the game, just getting the shit kicked out of and Geralt in real life would be fucking pissed, like the number of times he died. I had to save, and you go through that fucking load screen, because it would take a while to load. It was just bananas. But it's the fact that I chose that, and I'm going to stick with it, right? So then I think in that aspect you could do a similar, hey guys, listen, here's how this is going to work on each of these legs of travel, and we can do this extra hard. You'll get massive bonus out of it, right? There'll be a big, to a certain extent, HP bump. I don't, however you want to make, but, or we can play it down to like, 10-day travel. We can do that in 2 games or whatever. And I think that's an option. Again, like when the guy, if you give the players or the people the option, because that's what it is. It's all about choice, or all about just roll the dice, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like play rollies for it. I think that in its own set way, can kind of help you avoid those things. At least that's how I feel or see or think it. Like, when it comes down to it, if this roll turns up a 1, that sucks, but I'm gonna go with it. I just have to, this is how it's gonna be, and we'll work it from there, because we just gotta move on to the next thing.
What you said? You had a question for me.
So I was asking about if you played Witcher, but then understanding the levels,
okay.
the levels, gotcha. like when you select a really hard level in the game and you're playing it, and you're like, you can always go back and change it, but to a certain extent, like you got to get past that level and then reset, and it'll let you go. But
so Paradox says the load screen time, so you had time to recenter yourself.
I guess snacks. So.
Yeah. Pee break.
Yeah.
But I mean, and again, you're right. It comes and I'm glad to be getting this kind of input from you as a new player. Because I think new players have a very different view of the game than somebody who's been playing for 30 or 40 years. Is the aspect of how I mean, to your point on playing on hard level on Witcher or a video game or whatever, obviously the payoff is greater because you feel like you've accomplished something.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, it's the age old, like, well, if it's easy, it's no fun. Right.
Right. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are things that are easy that are fun, but that the thing is like, oh, dang, I did this. Now I got all these things. We got this loot, or we got this notoriety in the world, whatever. But it's still a matter of, are the people going to have fun doing it? But then also like, it's going to be worth it. You make them understand it's worth it, but it's going to suck. Like it's going to be a slog.
Yeah. But like I said, I always ask my players, look, if this is not, because as a DM, especially in a paid game, I mean, that's a whole nother aspect, but especially in a paid game, if you guys aren't having fun, I'm not doing my job. Or the DM is not doing their job. All right. If it's age-old friends and we're playing and you don't like my style, well then fuck you DM. And I'll play.
Take it over next time.
But in a paid game, it's like, if this isn't working for you guys, let me know and we'll adjust. But the converse of that is there are a multitude of DMs and they all have different styles. And, I have my style of running a game, and Jason has his style, and Matt Mercer has his style. And that's also what's great about, this resurgence is there's so much interest in people running games.
Right. So many options and directions and ways you could take it, which I think is, again, still an aspect about Dungeons and Dragons that I think is still so unknown. Right? If you can make people understand, guess what? Or well, I say guess what, but you're like, hey, listen, when this happens, it's literally however you want to play it. There's no set thing.
Yeah.
I made the joke, right? I can kind of turn into a joke, but I was serious at the time when I said it. We were doing one of the things where I'm like, oh, the thing opens. I immediately just toboggan on my axe, just write it down around the thing. And you're like, what? Are you serious? And I was like, oh, hell yeah, I'm serious. And like, no. And I'm like, I'm all about, for better or for worse, a little bit of chaos ensuing in something. Because I'm like, yeah, let's just see what happens.
Absolutely.
Like, who cares? Let's go.
Did I allow that, or did I quash
Well, I
that?
think the rest, again, that came back to me kind of figuring out like, okay, I don't want to hurt the party. That would hurt the party. Okay, fine. Granted, I felt in my heart for whatever reason
if I ever say as a DM, no, don't do that.
No, it was the party. You were absolutely going to let me do it, right? Especially because like in the role playing aspect, I was like, okay, so I get my axe ready. I'm going to just basically go forward. I'm going to use the axe under me to ride down and around the stairs and just see if I can ride it all the way around the circle down, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm sure I could make the rolls for that. Convincing maybe toxic trait, convincing myself, oh yeah, I'm going to get enough above 15.
I think I do remember. And the reason I allowed it is because I'm like, I want to see if you can make these fucking rolls.
that's why I think it totally initiated. I was like, fuck yeah, let's see if we can do that. Yeah. That's so cool.
And that's where the fun happens.
So right. Paradox and then, of course, the guys don't have it. They don't like it. So yeah.
Right. So Paradox says, in paid games, do you find a lot of players who want to all be the main hero? Too many Lukes, no Hans. Well, first of all, I think Han was a real hero, not Luke, but that's another discussion.
Too many Hans.
I actually don't. That is a very common problem, I think, at any table, paid or otherwise, where everybody wants to be in the spotlight. I'll be honest though, in my paid games, I don't run into that very often. I think everybody finds their role. I mean, you guys have all worked really well together, and there are a couple of you who, you know, who kind of just support the back and are always there. A couple of you that are more front and center, but I don't think I've ever experienced where it's people stepping on top of each other and it's like, oh, I want to be the hero here. I want to be in the spotlight. I think people are generally, for the most part, now there are always exceptions, but I think for the most part, people are pretty sensitive about that. And that's another thing I think is with this new revelation of the fact that there is such a depth, or can be such a depth to the game, that people are more sensitive to that in support of the narrative rather than I see it where when we were kids, it was all about the players. Everything is about my player, right? Yeah. Everything is about my player and my character and my mechanics and all that shit. Nowadays, I think it's about the story and it's about the narrative, and people have just, attached themselves to that notion, which I think is fantastic. And that's why you get, the critical roles and those really deep stories where you're like, holy shit, I ended up fucking crying over that session of fucking
totally, right? Totally. Like there's just things that you can do to realize, and then the game mechanics and stuff and things you'll see. But then I think it's also leads to the course like that thing. If you like, not to sound like I'm besmirching anybody, but I've seen, and now obviously you get through every type of version of the Critical Role. Like, so you get through all their stuff. Mm-hmm. There's still plenty of other people doing some pretty great Dungeons and Dragons work out there. But then there's some stuff you'll find you're like, that was kind of rough, dude. Like there's some guys they were doing Minds of Philander, and they're starting. I was like, man, is this what Minds of is, or is this how the guy is doing it? Right? Like you're just at a moment you're like, man, I'm just not getting into this. Just watching other people play D&D is one thing, but you're like, man, this is nothing's really compelling about it. Nothing's really like catching me. And then you're like, damn, man, that's okay. Well, maybe I'm not gonna play that module, but maybe it's not the module's fault. It's just the person running. They're like, they might be more strict. The book says this. It's all. I don't have to do as much work. Yada yada yada.
Yeah, I mean, there is certainly, to be eloquent about it, there's a lot of shit out there too. But I think that's a really good question that Paradox raises is about the main hero, and I've talked about that in the past with Adam on one of our shows. Is I think that falls on both the players, to be, that give and take, back to the improv kind of yes and give and take. Right. But also very much falls on the DM to recognize, and really good DMs will recognize, like, you should be able to get a read on your players and know when somebody looks bored or is not engaged. And it's your job as a DM to throw the spotlight around and make sure that everybody gets at least a little moment, in the sun. And if somebody is not super in your face and super role playing, but they're still having a good time and they're enjoying themselves, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying that everybody needs to do that. Mm-hmm. I'm a huge fan of playing Chewie. There you go. Chewie never gets any props.
Only with the crossbow, man. That's about it. When he gets injured or when he's got the crossbow. Hey, can I borrow that crossbow?
Exactly. Yeah. That was a very weird line from...
I'm going to keep this for a while. Yeah.
He's like, I really like this. You mean after 40 fucking years, that's the first time you picked that up? That was bullshit.
He wasn't going to take shit from... He wasn't going to accidentally take stuff from the Chewie, the Chewbacca, He wasn't going to take it from the Wookiee.
But yeah, so I think that definitely falls on the DM mostly, but also on the players to just kind of make sure that everybody is enjoying their time and everybody is a part of the narrative.
I think, granted, I don't only speak on, again, more of a player's perspective with that aspect. Again, I'm doing the DMing 2 sessions for my family members, and again, just mostly to get feedback to kind of recultivate and kind of hone the story of what's working and what doesn't work and what does or doesn't make sense. But I mean, I think when it comes back to stuff with those that get that more Luke, less Han, or more Han, less Chewie, kind of thing, they think they're all Hans. They'll stand out, right? You would imagine it, but it's also a matter of like, in those instances, you'd think those people are going to be, I feel like, and this is a more real life, they'll be so unaware that they just so unaware that they wouldn't realize it in that case. And then it has to be, you have to be about, and like, let's say I'm going to be or would or wouldn't be this person, but it's just like, well, then you just start messing with them. Well, you're like, oh, you want to do that? I'm going to go in and give you, you're trying to do this? I'm going to possibly screw it up at the last minute. I'm going to give you disadvantage. I'm going to, what? And then slip and just ruin their shine. Be the antithesis, be the Joker to their.
Absolutely. And again, that's part of the DM. The DM's job is to move the narrative along. That's all it is. And roll dice.
Yeah. But it's kind of funny.
Yeah, that is.
I thought about that.
So have you, obviously you have enjoyed immersing yourself in this game. I can tell, because you're pretty invested in it, which I think is fantastic.
I wasn't, I'm more of a, I definitely have more of an addictive personality too, but it was also just kind of like, oh yeah, there's a lot of stuff you can do and a lot of creativity and ways and outlets of things to do to work those creative muscles, for lack of a better term, to let those things come out. Because I think having an outlet to let certain things like that come out is a good thing. And I was like, oh, this is perfect. I didn't have that necessarily before. The improvisation, the ability for improvisation, ability for creating, was very limited. In a lot of things.
I'll have to. Seeing as you're in Chicago, I'll have to get you in a game, an in-person game.
Totally.
Let me know. You'd
man.
actually fit in. Well, you'd actually fit in pretty well with my my OG high school crew. We still play once.
Oh yeah, I can really come in and wreck shop. I will. Oh man, if you're vouching for me and then you bring me into something like that, buddy, just be prepared for me to just really piss some people off. But you included. I might I don't know what you're talking about.
I got this guy. He wants to play with us. He's a friend of ours. You know what I'm saying? He's a friend of ours.
He's coming in. He wants to be a gelatinous cube. I don't see the problem. Something ridiculous like that.
We'll have to talk about that. But I would like to. I play with these guys in person still. Obviously it's in between kids' schedules and family schedules. So we probably play once every couple of months on average, but I would like to get a regular game going downtown in person with new players or, so we'll talk about that.
That's so, if I can once I get stuff working with, I feel a bit more comfortable with DMing, then I'm talking about lucked out. There's literally a game shop I told you about that's right down the road from me, and they've got a very nice game room, and so it's a matter of finding time, and that would be a perfect thing to do some in-person time. When I was like, come out of the city for a little bit. You come up and we'll do some D&D, and I'll take you for some pho afterwards. It's a great pho place right next.
I would love that. Fuck yeah, great. You run a game. I'll play for a change.
That's the thing that I thought was really so just in general as just DMing, as we're talking about this now too, that I thought was kind of interesting. It's like how many, and it makes a lot of sense though, guys that are willing to DM and then are good at it, they're stuck. You're going to be stuck doing it for your life. And Brennan Lee Mulligan talks about that. He's like, yeah, you're going to only be at this career and you're never going to play because everybody DM. You can't get away from
and some people just love DMing, and I enjoy it. Obviously I enjoy it or I wouldn't do it, but there are times where I feel like, man, I just want to play, let me be the one in the dark for a while.
I'm about that. I would love to do something like that. That'd be real funny because then it's like, I don't have to worry so much about being such a rule stickler. Because I know if I've got a bunch of people that have DM, they're like, oh, I know that rule, or I'm going to do this, or or I see how far they
You
get
know
away with
what?
some shit too. Like if they're trying to be a little scuffed.
I actually find the opposite to be true. If you're DMing for a table of DMs, I actually think that they're more forgiving because they understand what it takes to run a game.
Oh no, absolutely. But I'm thinking it's like they're
rules lawyers.
Yeah. That's kind of what I'm saying. There'll be some rules lawyers, but it's not going to be like, you know what? And again, if you're doing it's a homebrew, or you're kind of doing like, hey, listen, this is what I read as the interpretation of the rule, and this is how we'll work it. I understand what you're trying to say, but I'll give it a shot. And then of course it's gonna work both ways. It'll work in your favor, but it's gonna work in my NPCs and bad guys' favor too.
Exactly.
Problem. Yeah. So it's not a bad, super bad thing, but.
Yeah. All right. We'll have to explore that. Anybody in the Chicago area, that's going to be my goal is to get a game together, whether I'm DMing or somebody else. And see if we can get that going. So
legit. Yeah.
But, be great, I have really enjoyed DMing you guys, especially in my homebrew, because I'm obviously more invested in that.
Yeah.
And I love where the narrative is going, and I am actually kind of writing this as we go.
Love that.
Like you guys are helping me write this adventure. And that was a kind of a thing too. Like, well, granted, we played obviously last night, but when I'm thinking about it, like, have we brought this up? And did he think about this? Maybe he can use this next time because I know you're gonna be. I'm like, okay, well, have these things in. Have it be a group of 5 to 10 halfling brothers that all happen to look a little alike, and they're in this fucking city. What are you talking about? I don't
know. Yeah, they're all fucking
got
an Australian accent, as it were. Like this.
No, there is
a scam.
There are a couple of things that you guys have done that I have actually now made written into this campaign. I love that. So
that's the thing. I think that again, that comes back to not only DM creativity, but player creativity, things that you didn't think of or didn't see that in a way, just how you can use a spell or do an action or something like that. Like, I can do this because here's how I see it. You're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's really, that's the thing. It is to an extent an actually collaborative aspect to a lot of
Absolutely.
things.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you guys are running the game as much as I am. And when that happens, that's when the game fulfills its prophecy. You know, and it comes into its own.
Absolutely.
Okay, on that, I think we will wrap it tonight. I've got some guests downstairs I have to attend to, but seriously, thank you for joining me tonight. Otherwise, the show wouldn't have happened because nobody wants to hear me just fucking spout my mouth off.
You want to do a part two of? You want to do a part 2 of a newbie D&D player? Let me know.
Absolutely.
We'll go for a couple, maybe 6 months down the road, and go from there. What I think or what I'm doing.
6 months? No, we'll have you on in a few weeks.
That's fine too.
All right. Cool.
All right, man.
Well, Paradox, thank you for joining us in the chat. Collin, thank you for joining me on the show. I'll talk to you afterwards about some of those character things in our campaign, and
absolutely,
definitely would like to have you back on the show again. I think your insight is really thoughtful, given how you've come into your own on this game. So, and I don't say that.
I can tone it down and then really amp it up to make it seem like it's the DMing that did it. It brought it all out. It was all of your hard work, Brian.
No, we keep it real here. We keep it real. We tell it like it is. So, having players like you makes it easy for DMs to tell a story. So.
Cool, man. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
It makes it easy to kind of go with stuff, man.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And we will see you next week. Same time, same channel. Ciao.
Bye.